Hey everybody, I've been wanting to do this for a while. This has got to be one of the best albums I've ever heard in my life, and I'd like to give a review of it, if you want to call it a review, a reflection on this album. I've enjoyed this album since 1973, which is the year it came out. Goodbye Yellow Brick Road by Elton John. I hope you'll consider watching as I share my thoughts on this, really one of the great albums ever made. Yeah, this album came out in 1973, and I would have been in junior high. They still call it junior high. And just for a couple, this was the first Elton John album I ever bought, and I think this is the copy I had. I'm not sure. Sometimes I picked up others over the years, but I remember I bought this at Union Lake Drugs in Union Lake, Michigan, years ago. And Don't Shoot Me, I'm only the piano player. And Elton John wasn't what he was back then, but it had Crocodile Rock on it, which was a huge song. And I remember putting it on, and it had Daniel on it. And also Elderberry Wine, Teacher, I Need You, High Flying Bird. This is a really good album. Don't Shoot Me, I'm only the piano player. Of course, I had Elton John's Greatest Hits, which I think came out later. But when I joined the Columbia Record Club in junior high, and this was one of the albums I bought. So I increased my album collection considerably when I joined that Columbia Record Club, although I think my parents had to keep bailing me out because I wouldn't send those cards back. But in fact, I quit and joined a couple times, and I think largely thanks to my parents who kept bailing me out. But you got that intro deal, so if you could quit and join again for something, I think I joined it 2 or 3 times. But I know the first time I ever joined it, I got that, was it 13 records for $1.99 or something like that, and this would have counted for 2 of those 13 because it's a double album, but this is one of the ones I got. And I remember back in the days of vinyl, if you had a double album, that'd be kind of like, especially if you're a kid like me, it would kind of discourage you from buying it in a store, because a vinyl single album might be $5, $6. A double album might be $12 or $13. I think when I was in high school, a good double album might even push $20. But anyway, so I've had this since I was a kid, like 12, 13, 14 years old, and really feel like I know this album quite well, and it's just a good album. A couple things I'll say about it. It's got a great album cover. I would say it's one of the great album covers of classic rock. Definitely glam rock. Elton John was glam rock. I feel like Elton John's one of those people that became a celebrity, and we kind of have to remember how he was. And it's kind of hard to unremember all the last 45 years, but yet to go back to how we perceived him way back in the early 70s when he was first becoming famous, which is pretty different than the way we think of him now. But he was like a glam rock artist. Just, I would maybe say kind of like Bowie or Matt the Hoople. He was definitely glam rock. I mean, although he always had kind of mid-tempo ballads, more so than like a rock band, but and he was piano based. But I would say that he was definitely a rock artist. But that's a great kind of glam rock album cover. Look, you've got the platform boots, the yellow brick road, the kind of cool shades. Definitely, yeah. He wasn't a celebrity yet. He was a rock and roll piano player. But this is a copy I picked up. I've got like 5 copies of this album. But now it might cost more, but I remember a few years ago I bought a couple of these I bought them like for $1 or $2 at like garage sales. I'd just buy one. But one thing I would say about this album is it really makes you miss vinyl because you look at that cover. I can't even show you in one shot. Look at that. I mean, all the lyrics. You get a cool picture, an original picture for each drawing. Let's see who did those pictures. It probably says it on the back. Inside cover illustrations by David Larkham and Michael Ross. So David Larkham and Michael Ross did all those covered inside cover depictions except Harmony and Saturday Night, which was illustrated by David Scott. But the outside cover was by Ian Beck. So, but look, you got all that original art. That to me is back when classic rock was part of the arts because you get these album covers were like that's art. You got all kinds of original, like whoever drew those was a great artist, and you got nice kind of one of a kind original art. You open it up. That's the band. And I don't know, one of the reasons I'm doing this now is because about 10 or 12 days ago, I did some little videos on Davey Johnstone, who's the guitar player for Elton John on these early great albums. He, I think, joined Elton John around Honky Chateau. And then I don't think he's as much on Rock of the Westies or Blue Moves. And then he joined, I read on the internet, he joined Elton back in like '82, and he's been with them ever since. But there was a period in the late '70s where Elton John kind of dropped this band, and you know what? I happened to notice that those aren't to me Elton's best years, the late '70s, early '80s. But this band was great, and you've got Nigel Olsson on drums, Dee Murray on bass, and then Davey Johnstone. One cool thing about that Davey Johnstone, he played a lot of electric guitar. Like, look down here, Candle in the Wind. That's such a pretty ballad. A lot of producers would have taken that pretty song, or like Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, or a lot of the kind of ballads on here, and they maybe would have made them like the Carpenters, got a bunch of studio musicians. By the way, there wouldn't necessarily have been anything wrong with that. I mean, the Carpenters are great, but they could have gotten a bunch of studio musicians and kind of schmaltzed it up with orchestration and everything. And this album does have orchestration, but I think it was added later, and the core of the album is a rock band. And that Davey Johnstone, I think his electric guitar is key, and he plays electric guitar on a lot of these songs instead of acoustic guitar, even if they're kind of mid-tempo ballads. And he used that Leslie rotary effect, which was kind of that old school '60s effect, which was still around. I don't think you hear it too much anymore, but it gives it that kind of dreamy, far away quality, that rotary effect. Especially on like Goodbye Yellow Brick Road or some of those songs with that electric guitar. So that band was critical, I think, to this album and that string of albums that he did that are also great. Honky Chateau, Don't Shoot Me, I'm Only Playing a Piano Player, Caribou. Caribou's the same way. This is Caribou. And on Caribou, I was reading about that. That's got that Davey Johnstone on that same band. And it's got a bunch of good songs on it, but Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me, which is the kind of the most famous song on this Caribou album, which this is Caribou's the follow-up to Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. And they tried some different things, and they left Davey Johnson's Leslie electric guitar with the rotary Leslie sound on it, and that's that Elton John sound. See, I feel like Elton John lost that on some of his later albums, because I think that was a really critical part of his sound, that electric guitar with that rotary effect, even on kind of mellow songs, where you might have a lot of producers would have thought of other instruments first, but I think it just gave it that kind of glam rock, but kind of dreamy, trippy sound, like to Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, and that Don't Shoot Me on, or Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me. That's like that. So that band was really important. But what a great list of songs. And I still remember, I can't even show this album at once, but there's Funeral for a Friend, Love Lies Bleeding. And I remember at that time, I didn't even have a stereo in my room. I had one of those old, just like a kid's turntable. It played 33 albums and 45s, and was mono, So I remember we used to put a quarter on the needle sometimes if the records would skip. You put a quarter on the needle, then they might play. But I remember still listening to that organ when it comes in. It sounds like an old reed organ or something. And that's got, speaking of Davey Johnstone, great electric guitar. Because Davey Johnstone is like very important to the Elton John band, but his guitar was often in the service of the songs. But once in a while, the guitar, they would really feature the guitar. And that Love Lies Bleeding is one that really features the guitar. Another one that really features the guitar in this album is Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting, which I've even heard him say he might have kind of half written that song. I don't know if he got credit for it. And here's some more, like on All the Young Girls Love Alice. That's also got like a rock guitar in it. But definitely look at this. Look at this Funeral for a Friend. That's kind of like it's one of those long songs that were too long for AM radio. So it also, like Elton John was the FM album rock artist. Candle in the Wind. And you know something, that's such an iconic song now, but that was kind of an album track, a deep track through a lot of the 70s. And over time, I think people sang it and it became more and more popular. But when Princess Diana died in 1997, I remember I picked up the paper. I was with my wife. We were coming home and big headlines, Diana, the Princess of Wales, has died. And I said to her, like, as soon as I said that, you watch, Elton John's going to sing that song, Candle in the Wind. They'll redo it somehow. And sure enough, he did. He did that, the English Rose, Goodbye English Rose. But there's the Marilyn Monroe tribute. I can't show you these too well. Gray Seal. Oh my gosh, what a great song. I mean, this album was a double album, but you put on any side, and there were a bunch of great songs. This song has no title, just words in a tune. The other person I should mention, speaking of the band, is Bernie Taupin, and I think all these lyrics, look how important the lyrics were. And all these albums, you always got the lyrics. And that's so important. And Bernie Taupin was a great lyricist, and I think his lyrics were kind of trippy and dreamy, which went perfect with the way Elton John played the piano. And I always think, in fact, I read somewhere like Goodbye Yellow Road or something. It might have been like 6 pages of text. And Elton John would pull out like 2 little verses of it, And, and we're not, I also think sometimes he's kind of like one of those lyric writers. You're never quite sure what he means, but it sounds good when he says it anyway. I heard Stevie Nicks say that, or Christy McVie said that about Stevie Nicks' lyrics, like on Landslide or The Chain. I can still hear you saying you would never break the chain. Christy McVie said, sounds wonderful. I have no idea what it means. I think that's kind of like some of these Elton John lyrics. I mean, what is it really, good, but awesome. Benny and the Jets. That one I remember kind of getting sick of, but it's a great, great song. Look, and those were rock songs. Look, I've seen that movie too. Sweet Painted Lady. Elton was also PG-13. I always say a lot of album-oriented rock. YouTube is very censorious. I noticed that when I did my Cream magazine reviews, they always are flagging my videos for like inappropriate content, and all I'm really doing is showing those old Cream magazines. But Elton John, yeah, look, Sweet Painted Lady, seems it's always been the same. Getting paid for being laid, seems it's just the name of the game. Dirty Little Girl, All the Young Girls Love Alice. I'm a sexual song. That was back before we had LGBT. All the Young Girls Loved Alice. I remember listening to that 7th grade. Your sister can't twist, but she can rock and roll. Look at that great picture. Girl out there. Does people dance anymore? Crocodile Rock. Elton John had a bunch of songs about dancing. Roy Rogers is Riding Tonight. Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting. Social Disease. I'm a genuine example of a social disease. And then Harmony. Harmony is really one of the greatest Elton John songs that I think. Harmony is a really great song. And I've read on Wikipedia it says this, but it was supposed to be a single, but like Goodbye Yellow Brick Road and Benny of the Jets, and also I think Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting were such huge top 40 hits that by the time they and they didn't want to compete with themselves, so they were waiting, and by the time those songs fell off the charts, it was time for Caribou to come out. And that, so Harmony was never really released as a single, but Harmony is one of the greatest Elton John songs ever recorded. Definitely an excellent, excellent song. So I'm sure most of you have heard a lot of these. I mean, if you've been under a rock, maybe you've never heard Benny and the Jets. Maybe you've never heard Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. A lot of these, even if you're not remembering the name right off the top of your head, like Harmony or Sister Can't Twist but She Can Rock and Roll, Gray Seal, that's another one you will have heard. But but definitely you should get this album and just play it all the way through. And, I just wanted to say this about Elton John. He's kind of one of those guys that became a celebrity. Ozzy Osbourne just died this past week, and he's someone else that became a celebrity. Rod Stewart, over the years, became a celebrity. Keith Richards and Mick Jagger became celebrities. And it's sometimes hard to go back and remember how great these people were without all their celebrity trappings, just as pure the music they did. Just listen as on musical and artistic grounds, and get away from all the stories about Elton John's temper tantrums and his shopping sprees, and all some of the sexual politics that sometimes accompany him now that were not part of his image or story back in this period. Just get away from all that and just go back and listen to some of these early albums he did. How freaking great they are. By the way, that Davey Johnstone, the guitar player, I don't think he was on Tiny Dancer or Leave-On. Those are a little earlier still, and they're great. But really, when he came out with that band, the Elton John Band, which is Davey Johnstone, Nigel Olsson, and Dee Murray, I think those are and he did that string of albums. Boom, boom, boom. Just some of the greatest albums ever made. And I would say this is the best of the bunch. This is one of the best albums of classic rock ever. Period. Thanks. God bless.